According to huge epidemiological studies in Europe, about 1 person out of 20 suffers from agoraphobia. The word agora comes from ancient Greek and it can be translated as marketplace. And in this way it is expressed that people with agoraphobia are afraid of public places. In fact, many people stay at home completely because they are afraid that outside something could happen to them or they could experience a panic attack. And I really don't want to go into details because I also don't want to trigger anybody, because it's much more interesting to speak about what helps if you are suffering from agoraphobia. And from a scientific point of view, there seems to be no better strategy than confrontation with an acceptance mindset. So on the one hand, you need this acceptance mindset, which of course in the beginning is very difficult to cultivate because you are in a constant fight with your anxiety and you want to suppress the emotion of anxiety, which is absolutely understandable and something I did myself when I was struggling with my social anxiety as well. I always wanted to push it away. I didn't want to feel it. I tried everything not having to feel it, but this constant struggle actually made it all worse. I felt that the more I was fighting the anxiety, the more I was trying to suppress it, the more it got me. And only when I began to accept it, when I said, okay, anxiety, please come over, please hug me. I know you just want to protect me, and I know the first impact of you hugging me is very uncomfortable because you are trying so hard. But the moment I had this acceptance mindset, and of course you have to practice a little bit because in the beginning it's very hard, but the more I had this mindset, it more often happened that all of a sudden the anxiety went away. It was a little bit like with a bully who lost his interest because all of a sudden you are no longer fighting him and you're not getting angry, and therefore it's not that interesting to bully you any longer. So the first step is to cultivate this acceptance mindset. But the next step has to be, and this is really essential, the next step has to be the confrontation. You really have to look for those situations. You have to go out there and you have to hug the anxiety by yourself. Because to change the fear circuits in your brain, there's nothing as effective as experiencing that all the situations that you were afraid of before, actually after you visit them again and again, there's nothing to fear. There might be some uncertainty, you might feel excited, but actually you will realize after maybe a first impact of the anxiety, you realize, well, it's all safe. I can handle even the highest levels of anxiety, and the longer I stay in the situation, habituation kicks in and I realize, well, the anxiety is fading out. And to make it easier for you, you can also choose gradual exposure, which means you begin with something that is more easy, like for example, the so-called interoceptive exposure, something that is done in therapy quite often. For example, you sit down on a swivel chair and you turn around and around and around, and after a while you will feel a little bit swindle and you will feel a little bit nausea maybe. So quite similar feelings to the feelings you experienced during a panic attack. But when people have a panic attack, they often interpret those signals from the body as something really bad. And the more they think about, well, this might be a signal for X or Y, the worse the situation becomes and the stronger the panic attack becomes. So it's very helpful to face these body signals in the interoceptive confrontation. And after a while, you will realize, well, those body signals, well, they come and they go, and it's nothing to fear. Tip number 2 can be derived from this interoceptive confrontation, and it is to make more sport. Because when we are doing sports, we also have the same body signals that we sometimes get when we have a panic attack. Our body is sweating, our pulse is very high, and maybe after a very strong exhaustion, we might even feel a little bit dizzy. And to live through all these body signals and to realize, well, those are quite normal. They come and they go, and it's nothing to fear, can be very helpful. And therefore it's no wonder that a study in which participants with agoraphobia had to go through an moderate running program in which they had to run about 6.5 kilometers 3 to 4 times per week, experienced a very strong relief from agoraphobia, but their anxiety relief was almost comparable to a group who had received the tricyclic antidepressive medication clomipramine. And in another study, which is maybe even more interesting, but also a little bit crazy because it's strange that the participants were willing to take part in this study, because in this study by Ströhle and colleagues published in 2009, participants were injected CCK4, which is known to be able to evoke panic attacks. But in one group, before the injection, the participants were allowed to go on the treadmill for 30 minutes. And in comparison to a group of participants who had to rest for 30 minutes, those who had done the aerobic sport had much less panic attacks after the injection of CCK4. So if you are suffering from agoraphobia, doing sports is very good, because on the one hand, of course, you are strengthening your whole body, you make it more robust. And on the other hand, it's also some kind of confrontation therapy, because you realize that all these body signals that, for example, might be at the beginning of a panic attack are quite normal. They are the same that I'm experiencing when I'm doing sports. And on the other hand, nothing happens if I have these body signals. And something you should know as well, many people who are agoraphobic, they are afraid of losing their consciousness. This is something that almost never happens, because during a panic attack, your pulse usually is very high, and to lose your consciousness, your pulse has to be very low. Therefore, you are in a state that is completely different from losing your consciousness. The third and last tip is again about your mindset when you are facing your fear, because it's not only helpful to have this acceptance mindset, but also to see every confrontation as some kind of therapy. No matter whether you are in a therapy or you are in everyday situations in which you have to face your fear anyway, the best attitude to these situations probably is to see them as therapeutical. And this is something that could be shown in a very famous study by Southworth and Kirsch, in which they went for a walk for 10 times with agoraphobic patients. But one group was told, well, these walks, which were very hard for the patients because they were strong agoraphobics who had a lot of anxiety to leave the house at all. One group was told, well, these walks are just for us scientists. We want to diagnose how strong your anxiety is. Therefore, we have to make these walks to see how far you can go, and then afterwards we can start the therapy. The second group was told, well, all these walks are already your confrontation therapy. We will go as far as possible, and probably you will experience that the more often we do it, the further you will be able to go. When they analyzed the results, they first of all found that in comparison to an untreated control groups, both active groups, no matter what they were told, now had much less anxiety. So again, confrontation therapy was very effective. But what was much more interesting was when they did another test, so another walk with the participants, those who had been told, well, your walks had been a therapy, those were now able to endure their walk much longer. So it seems like that this kind of growth mindset was very helpful for their therapy. To believe that every confrontation they go through actually is therapeutic and helps them to confront their fear in the future. So therefore, this might be a second mental strategy that might be very helpful for you the next time when you have to face your fear. I really hope you found this episode helpful, and if you want, we will see you next time.